If you've been wanting a behind the scenes look at the development and running of a in-person physical therapy business as well as an online business, then this episode is for you. Put your seatbelt on. This is a good one. Welcome to the Up in My Business podcast with me, Lex Lancaster, where you'll get an inside look at all things tech, business, and my life as a physical therapist turned digital operations expert. You'll hear all about my lessons as a business owner, the ins and outs of tech for your business, and more. From SEO, websites, and email marketing to automations, launches, and copywriting, I've got you. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. So just to preface this episode, I'm going to start off just like I did last time. I really enjoyed giving you a little bit of a life update, and then we'll jump right into the episode. And what you're going to get today is a behind the scenes look at the startup and now the running of an in-person physical therapy business as well as my online digital business. I'm going to try to keep it short, and I was actually going to separate these two episodes, but I really can't because I'm going to talk about both of them at the same time because they were opened, not at the same time, but very much so close together. So splitting them up would not be easy for me, and it would likely confuse you. So I'm just putting them all together. So if this episode is a little bit longer, then just watch it in a couple different segments or speed me up, whatever you decide to do. I first want to talk about volleyball because I did receive some DMs about going to play volleyball. And I will tell you right now, I was so sore. On Friday, was it Friday? I think it was Friday and Saturday. Saturday, I couldn't move. I woke up and I was laying in bed and I was like, oh my God, I cannot even get out of bed right now. And it felt like preseason. So if you played sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You show up to your first practice and it's really like the first week that's preseason. And you go to day one and you do all of this stuff that you haven't been doing in probably a couple of months or like a week or so, because like I went from sport to sport, but regardless, if I stopped playing basketball and then I started softball, or if I played volleyball and then I started playing basketball in the next week, for whatever reason, preseason still crushed me. So it felt like preseason. I could not get out of bed. I was walking around as if my muscles were going to bust out of my legs. I will say that I've had a little bit of shoulder issues for the last couple days, but it makes sense physiologically because I haven't swung at a volleyball indoor since indoor. It's been, Lord knows, probably 8 or 9 years. And for outdoor on the beach, I haven't played that since I think it would be last year at this time. So I haven't been playing, so obviously I'm going to be sore, and my right shoulder has always given me issues, so I am definitely feeling it in my shoulder. I've been doing some rehab-ish stuff this week. Kyle really wanted to dry needle me, but I'm not a fan of needles, and I'm not getting dry needled. It just is what it is. He is trying to convince me that I should just suck it up and do it. But I just am not a fan of needles, and I never have been. And I tried dry needling once and it just wasn't fun. And that's why I didn't take a dry needling class, because as a PT, you are the subject during the courses and I'm not trying to do that. So so shoulder is feeling a little bit better today. Definitely not perfect. So I am doing rehab-y stuff because, as you know, I'm going to California next week and I'd like to play volleyball and not come home with a broken shoulder. So we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, my birthday went amazingly. I know we talked about the intrusive thought of tearing my ACL. I did not tear my ACL, so we're good there. Knock on wood, because that intrusive thought may have been correlated to the beach, but we're just gonna let it ride, because I really hope that will not be the case. But otherwise, everything was amazing. I had a great weekend with my family. We went out locally, but there was a huge snowstorm, so we weren't really doing much on Saturday morning. Our plans kind of got shuffled, if you will, and we ended up staying home until we went out for lunch because there was so much snow. I think we got like a foot overnight, so that was pretty wild. But things are going well. Going to California next week. I will be releasing I'm going to record episodes before I go to California, obviously. So I'm going to release this one, comes out. It will be the 13th. And then the one for the 20th, I will record likely this week as well. So that way that is out of the way and I don't need to record in California because that obviously wouldn't happen. Yeah, so I'm super excited for the next week. I will be leaving midweek next week, headed to San Diego to hang out with Anna Hartman, Movement Rev on Instagram. She has an in-person course where I am just photographing the course, and I learned so much last year just watching her do her things. So really excited to be a part of that again. And then flying from there to LA, and I'll be hanging out with Shantae. So really excited for the next week. I like to leave home, but for my people who are also like me, where you have I have mild, it's not travel anxiety. I just have I like to be home. I like a routine. And when I get out of my routine, and also I am I'm sure you already have assumed this, but Moose definitely calms my anxiety a little bit. So not having Moose with me, I definitely have this, I would say it's a day-ish of, okay, I now don't have my dog and I'm away from home and I'm out of my routine. And I just have a little bit of, I wouldn't call it anxiety. It's just, I don't know, just, it's different. It feels different for me. And I have this gut feeling of oh, can I do this? I don't know if anyone has this. So if you do, let me know. Cause I feel pretty alone in this whole, I've created this monster having a dog, but I was like this before too, before I had moved. So just the first part of traveling is always interesting for me because I'm oh man, I really don't want to leave home. I really don't want to leave my routine. But either way, I'm pretty excited. And yeah, I feel like that's really all the life updates I have. I know a lot of people are super excited about the fact that I'm getting mail. Because if you were here at the new house, if you heard about the new house, I wasn't getting mail before. So I know a few people have been celebrating with me in the DMs about the fact that I can finally get mail at my new address. So pretty excited about that as well. It's such an adult thing to say, but yeah, I'm getting mail. So that's exciting. It was such a freaking nightmare because we still don't have an address according to Google or Apple Maps. So we're still not showing up, which is fine because, I guess come try and find me. But yeah, we're getting mail. So that's a huge benefit. They're not taping MapQuest or TomTom maps on our packages anymore. So I guess we are leveling up. So without further ado, I guess let's jump in because this is going to be a long one. I know it is because there's so many things that went on and I don't have a list. I'm going to just kind of freestyle this. Typically I write down at least the things that I know that I want to talk about and not forget. So I might jump around a little bit, so bear with me, but I just wanted this to kind of flow. I didn't want to have a checklist and I want it to be real. I feel like one of the biggest problems when we talk about business, whether it's online business or in-person business, is that people get this false idea of what it looked like. And then they compare their current situation to what they're seeing happen. And one of the things that Kyle and I have both had happen to us is oh, you guys, you're moving spaces. You must be making a lot of money, or you work a lot. You shouldn't work so much. And we also get a lot of the, how do you do all the things that you're doing at the same time? And I feel like pulling back the curtain on this stuff, if you are listening to the podcast, you're going to get the truth. And the thing is people see your success and they wonder how it happened so fast. And I would say fast is a relative word. So we'll jump into all of that stuff. So I guess what I'm going to also say is that Kyle and I, as far as the brick and mortar business side, have a very unique situation in which we did not practice physical therapy in the area that we opened up our clinic in. So I will say that has been a unique perspective that I can offer other people, especially for my brick and mortar coaching. One of my clients, she did the same thing. She had moved to a new area and hadn't worked there before. And it's a whole different beast. So understand that this is also from a perspective of someone who did not work in the area that they opened up their clinic in, which if you did do that, you know how valuable that is because you have clients from your previous job, or maybe, you have a lot of friends and family in the area who talk about you. You might have connections at like a high school or clubs that you were a part of. So it's very different as far as being in a new area without having, I'm going to say, those connections. We didn't have a ton of connections. So it's also coming from that point. And then on my side, I also obviously had an advantage, or I was blessed to actually be working for Shante when I started my business because, having someone who is so well trusted by her community, the fact that she talked about me and she shared my story, etc., obviously benefited me because people trusted Shante, so they started trusting me. So I recognize that that is also a privilege that I had with starting my online business. So when you kind of understand the background of that, make sure you're taking everything in context, and also understand that just because things worked for me or for us at Renegade does not mean that they're just going to automatically work. But you already know that. I know. I'm just saying it as a disclaimer. So, all right, let's jump in. So here's the thing. When Renegade was not a plan, so our physical therapy practice that we opened, that was not the plan at all. We graduated PT school, and you already know, if you've been listening to my podcast, I had already started my digital business as being a virtual assistant while I was in PT school. So let's just say I did start that in January of 2018. I started working for Karen Litzy, and then in June of 2018, I started working for Shante. So I had already started my digital business as like a side gig, if you will, while I was in PT school, while I was on clinical. And then 2019, we graduated PT school. And then Kyle and I, our plan was to be travel PTs for 5 years. So we were going to travel together, which I highly recommend. That's a different episode though, because it wasn't for us, but travel PT for 5 years. The reason we were going to do that is because we were going to pay off our student loans. So you make a different, if you will, amount of money when you are a travel PT. And we wanted to travel in general. So we were like, well, why don't we pair our travel needs, wants, desires with work, and then we'll, kill two birds with one stone. We'll still be pretty young when we finish up because I graduated at 27. I graduated in 2019. It's now 2023. I think I was 27 when I graduated PT school, and I think Kyle was 26. That would make sense. So we graduated and we'd be finished with paying off our loans just over 30, which amazing. And this is also saying, like, I have no clue if we actually would have paid them off in that time, but we would have knocked down a lot of money just because the salary you make is very different compared to an in-person physical therapy clinic, like a brick-and-mortar space in a location versus a travel PT job. So anyway, with that aside, that was our plan. We were going to be travel PTs for 5 years. And then after 5 years, we were going to essentially, the way that we were picturing travel PT is we were going to test out different living locations. So we had no plans of where we were going to live at the time. We had no idea as far as when we were going to open up a business. We knew we wanted to, we just didn't know. We had no plans to do it in the time that we did it. It was always going to be 5 years and then think about it and then decide then. And so I'm still doing my side gig, my online business, and this is going to be like side by side the entire time here. So I'm hoping that you can connect the different stories. So my digital business, I was still doing as a side gig the entire time we were in Ketchikan, Alaska as travel PTs. So graduated in 2019, June of 2019, took our NPTE end of July 2019, and then we were searching for travel PT jobs. Got a job in Ketchikan, Alaska in August, and then moved out to Ketchikan, Alaska in September of 2019. Yeah, 2019. Our first day of work was September 23rd, I believe. So at that time, we had just graduated PT school, took our test, got a job, and we moved across the country. So we moved from New Hampshire all the way to Ketchikan, Alaska. And we had, I believe if we did the actual math, it was like $1,900 total between the two of us. So we moved on less than $2,000 across the country. And just for like a picture, we actually went to the grocery store because we got there in the middle of the night on the ferry from Prince Rupert Island. And how do I say this? We got there in the middle of the night. It was a storm. Ketchikan's a rainforest. It's not Alaska like you're thinking about Alaska. It's like Seattle, but on steroids. I think they got like 170 something inches a year of rain last year. Anyway, so we got there in the middle of the night. It was a storm. And this is putting into perspective of how much money we didn't have and how much we were actually struggling. So we arrived in Ketchikan at night, woke up the next day. I believe it was a Saturday. We went to the grocery store, and we're on an island. So when you're on an island, shit is more expensive. Like, it's just more expensive because it has to be boated in or flown in regardless. There's no ground transportation. So everything was expensive. We had, I think I bought, or I was picking up like boxes of, it was either cereal or granola bars or something. And I think it was actually like just generic granola bars. And a box of 6 of them was $4 more than we used to pay. And I think a box of cereal we picked up was like $8. And I remember standing in the grocery aisle crying. Like, I actually started crying in the grocery store because we were in a place with no one we knew. We still hadn't, because we had not met anyone. We didn't go to work yet. And we had no money. And we were literally across the country and still hadn't started our jobs because we actually took a stipend from our travel company to get out there. So they paid for our first month of rent, our security deposit, and they paid us a travel stipend so we could get across the country because we just didn't have money. And we camped a couple nights so we didn't have to pay for a hotel. It was, oh, sorry, my pen just dropped. It was a whole thing. So I remember crying in the grocery store. So I'm telling you this story because this is perspective. Like, Kyle and I both came from families that could have definitely helped us. But at that point in our life, like, we weren't asking for help from anyone. And it's just, I just want to give you the perspective of, we did not come from, making a ton of money in school and stuff. Like, we both had graduate assistant jobs, and we got half off our PT tuition. We worked 20 hours a week on top of that. We got paid a stipend to be graduate assistants when we were in PT school. But by all means, that was paying, I think both of us lived on, I think it was $600 a month. So we saved what we could. I also waitressed. Like, I did save some money, but also living expenses and freaking textbooks and shit. That's so expensive. So anyway, yeah. So that was kind of like perspective. We arrived in Ketchikan as travel PTs. We stayed there for 6 months. We didn't really love travel PT because it fits. I'll do more on this later on because it's a whole different topic, but it just didn't fit the way that we want to work in a workplace. Like, we want to make a difference in a workplace. And we felt like as travel PTs, you're kind of expected to show up, do your job, and leave. And I think that's great for humans without characteristics like Kyle and I have. We really want to like go in, and if we see something and we see how it could be better, we want to like pitch an idea and potentially have it listened to and whatever. And it just didn't really work out like that. So now this is me during my going back to my digital business now, during that travel assignment on my lunch breaks, when I would get home at night, and if a patient canceled, I was working on my digital business stuff. So I would be doing graphics, I would be sending emails, I would be just communicating back and forth with different web design clients, because at that point in time I had taken, I believe, 2 different clients on top of Shantae. So I now had, I believe, 3 to 4 clients, and I was doing that on the side. Because for me, it was never about like, can I add more to my income? That really wasn't what it was about for me. It was more or less like that was my stress relief. So a lot of people talk about how you have work stress and you need to find something to counteract the work stress. For me, in the clinic, it was not an environment that I thrived in. And when I got to pull back from the clinic environment and do my digital business creation stuff, that was when I felt really fucking good. Like, I felt so good. It was a stress relief thing for me. I loved doing it. So it wasn't me doing it because I was like making a ton of money and it was providing me, freedom. It was more or less like it was stress relief for me. I absolutely loved it. And it gave me an out, if you will. It gave me a way to spend my nights doing something that I truly, truly loved. So that would be where we're at. Let's see, let's just say we're in January, February, March of 2020. So COVID hit. So that was the game changer for us. So when COVID hit, there were no travel PT jobs. Now, let me back up. So I'm forgetting a whole part of the story here. So in December of 2019, Kyle and I were thriving, if you will, as far as like, cool, we like the travel thing. We did a 6-month contract. Usually it's a 3-month contract. And we said, okay, never again with the 6 months. The 3 months would be perfect. You go in, you do your job, you leave. And once we decided that, this would be December, January-ish, we actually figured out, I remember sitting down with Kyle and we tried to figure out like, why are we not happy with what we're doing? And a big thing we kept coming back to was that we didn't have anyone around us that we were really close with, and we weren't close to our family. And it wasn't easy for us to get back to our family. So we kind of decided internally that we're going to ditch the travel PT gig for a little bit to see if we felt better, if we were closer to family and friends, etc. And even if we were just not on an island, a remote island in Alaska. So in January, we actually reached out to 2 different companies, and they both offered us full-time positions, full-time jobs back in New England. So those companies will go unnamed, but those 2 different companies offered us full-time positions if we came back from Alaska and took the jobs. So there wasn't like any sort of like sign-on bonus or whatever. One of the companies offered to pay for our commute back from Alaska, because it was kind of expensive to travel, I'll be honest, from Ketchikan to New Hampshire. So they were like, well, we'll pay for you to come back and work for us. So all of that communication and interview process, etc., was in January. So this was still before COVID. So we had planned to go back to New Hampshire. Well, really it was New England, because one of the companies was not in New Hampshire. We had planned to go back to New England in January, not do a travel PT assignment after our next assignment, or after our current assignment, and then we would land in New England. So then we'd be close to our family, close to our friends, whatever. So I recognize that this is also still not talking about brick and mortar business. I'm getting there, I promise, because this is all important. Because you need to understand that this is not our freaking plan. I promise, this is not our plan. We did not plan for this. So we arrived back in March of 2020 with a plan to start those jobs. So here's the thing. This is what happened, is we were ready to start the full-time positions. We had taken one of the jobs with the companies. They wanted to take us both on. And we'd be in the same location, well, kind of the same location, different satellite locations. And we got back and COVID was here. We literally traveled back from Seattle. I told you this in a different episode, from Seattle to New Hampshire. And it was the week that everything shut down. So like when we got back, we were actually afraid they were going to close state borders. So when we got back, there was nothing open, rightfully so. So nothing was open. The PT clinic we had taken jobs at wasn't open. And they basically told us that they couldn't take us on yet. So they couldn't start paying us because obviously they were not making money and they didn't have space to bring on a new employee. So 2 new employees. So it made sense. But so in March, at that point in time, we were like, okay, well, we now have to figure out a way to make money in this time, because we had freaking refinanced our student loans. So our student loans, we have a shitload of loans between the 2 of us, and most of them all of them were from the government, but some of those interest rates were terrible. So we were like, well, let's refinance our loans to a private lender, at least some of them, the high interest rate ones, so that way we could pay them off sooner and not pay as much interest, with the idea that we'd be travel PTs and be able to pay a lot more than just the baseline payment. So we had already refinanced our loans. So we had saved money in Ketchikan. Don't get me wrong. We kind of lived like we were still in college. And we always really have lived like we were still in college. We didn't spend a ton of money. And also we didn't have a ton of money to spend. So we were saving as much as we could. So with that being said, we let's see. We needed to make money in March because our March loan payment and our April loan payment, etc., were still going to be due for our private lender because they had paused the federal government stuff, but they didn't pause private lenders, and our private loans between the two of us were about $2,000. So we had to make money in some way, shape, or form. And I still had my side gig. Everything was still fine there. But like Kyle didn't have anything to go back to. And we sat down and we said, okay, cool, let's take a travel job until they can take us on at this clinic. Well, guess what? They had no travel jobs open. So travel jobs were far and few between. And if they were in existence, they were taken by people who had years and years of experience and or they were working in like COVID positive units. And I think that would have just like killed my vibe. So there were no jobs for travel PTs. And it was all over the Facebook groups. It was all over the recruiter pages. There were no jobs. So we were like, okay, great. So now we have no job to go back to. We kind of have to just wait around. So this was March. And I remember I had a clinical. I had 2 different clinicals that I did when I was in New Hampshire. It actually wasn't 2 different clinicals. It was one provider and another provider that now worked at different places. But when I was on clinical, both of those providers and one was a business owner, they were there. And one was my CI and one was the business owner of the place that I did my clinical at. So I remember that they were in existence and I said, cool, I'm actually going to reach out to them and see if they need help because it was in pediatrics. And lo and behold, people still need PT during COVID, especially the little babies and the little ones. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to reach out to them and see if I can work for them and get a job. So at that point, Kyle didn't do pediatrics. That wasn't a thing. So now this is all important because this will come into play here. In April of 2020 and May of 2020, I started interviewing for those 2 positions. And I actually started teaching for Utica College as an adjunct professor in in May of 2020 as well. So April, May, June, I actually took on 3 different jobs. So because Kyle and I let me back up because I have to do this in order. So in March of 2020 and April 2020, I remember sitting down with Kyle and we had said to the person that we took the job from, or I said, hey, look, I'm taking this part-time per diem, really, PT job, PT job, and I would love to work 35 hours a week for your practice so that I have 5 hours a week to work for them because I wanted a piece of pediatrics in my life. And it was really important to me. And it was not met with a yes. And that for me set me into a place where I was like, well, if you're not caring about my happiness now, then I can't imagine and that's going to change. So I said, all right, great. So I'm not taking this job. So I actually ditched the job that we came back to New Hampshire for. And instead, I reached out. So I had taken that part-time PT job, pediatric PT job, and I planned to work between 5 to 10 hours a week there. And I said, all right, well, I know of a clinic that my CI is now working at that I would love to work at. So I actually took a job. I reached out to them, did an interview, and went through all the onboarding stuff. And I took a job with them in June of 2020. And I was a full-time pediatric PT at this place. So full-time pediatric PT at one place, which was 40 hours technically. And it was a lot of telehealth in the beginning, obviously because of COVID. And then I had a part-time PT job, 5 to 10 hours a week. And then it was mostly 5-ish. And then in May of 2020, I also took an adjunct teaching position for anatomy and physiology through Utica College. And I still do that now. So I love teaching, was always a part of my dream. And I get to do that in many different ways now, but I am teaching at the college level right now for Utica College. Or Utica University, excuse me. So at the start of June, so June came around, I was working a part-time job, a full-time job, and now an adjunct teaching job. So, and my business. So And I recognize some people are probably sitting there like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, exactly. What the fuck is wrong with me? So let me back up. So now you have my job lineup, right? So I now have a job lineup I had, and I'm going to go back to my business in a minute. We're going back and forth here for a reason. In April of 2020, when Kyle and I sat down, we said they kept telling us that they couldn't take us on as PTs. So Kyle still wasn't making money. So I was helping him pay his loans. I was paying my loans. We were paying to, I believe at that point, we were paying to live with my sister-in-law, Kyle's sister, and brother-in-law. And obviously paying for our food. We had bills. We were still paying on them. And like I said, our loans alone were $2,000 total between the two of us. And that's just our loans. That's not even counting our car loans and all the other BS that we have. So in April, Kyle and I sat down, and Kyle was like, we can't wait for me to get this job, because COVID was still a big thing. Like, it was back and forth. They couldn't take on a new PT. And Kyle was like, I can't wait. I can't wait to take this job. So what are we going to do? And it was in that moment we had read Danny Mattei's Fuck Insurance book in Alaska. So now I'm going back to Alaska. In January, we had sat down at a table in our kitchen in Alaska and said, this could work. Because Kyle gave me a bunch of shit, and he was like, we're not going to open up a cash pay clinic. It'll never work. And I said, read this book. And he said, oh, okay, it will work. So we had sat down at the table. We built out our logo. We built out our mission. We built out who we wanted to treat, our ideal client. I actually still have that notebook from Catch Can. So we wrote down our whole business plan with no intention on using it anytime soon. However, especially for an in-person business, we started posting on Instagram. So we went from the traveling PTs to @Renegade Movement or Renegade MVMT on Instagram. So in January of 2020, we're backing up again. I recognize this is like freaking ping pong, but back, I think I'm thinking of pinball, not ping pong. Anyway, so in January, we had planned out Renegade, but we were just on Instagram. We were just posting stuff on Instagram. That's all. That was the only goal. We started a podcast and did stuff on Instagram. We were like, we're going to set the stone, if you will, and start taking steps forward for Renegade, but we're not going to do the whole thing. So then in April, Kyle was like, well, what if we start Renegade now? And we were like, oh my God, that's insane. We don't have money to start a clinic. We don't have a space to start a clinic in. So we had reached out back in January about, once again, backing way up, because this is a part of the story I left out until now, and I recognize that. In January, we had talked to a CrossFit gym owner, and we said, hey, what do you think about us doing a pop-up clinic in your space? And we would just be there putting a table in the clinic, weekends or whatever. And this was a big part of us working at that other clinic, the full-time job, because our goal was to eventually open up a clinic. So we were going to start doing stuff on the side and just doing pop-up spaces, recovery care sessions, whatever, at this CrossFit gym to just get started. So I had said we weren't planning to open up a brick and mortar space. What I meant by that was we were not planning on making it a full-time job. That was not our plan at all. We were going to have it be a side gig for years, rather than having our own space. And then in April, Kyle was like, well, what if we just do Renegade? What if I just do Renegade? Because mind you, gyms are also closed. So it's not like we could just start up right away. So Kyle was like, we can do this, but you're going to have to help me, because obviously if you're starting a business, you're not making any money. I think people forget about that. And the best lesson I have learned, and it's from Shantae, is not to burn your ships. Burning the ships does not fucking work, and it creates a terrible sense of anxiety when you do. I've watched people do it, and it's terrible. We did not burn the ships. So in April, Kyle said to me, I'm going to need your help. And I said, okay, cool. I had already planned out to have the full-time pediatric PT job, the part-time pediatric PT job, my business as a side gig, and Utica College or Utica University as a teaching gig. So I already had money that we could be making to pay our bills. So I was going to be the person that paid our bills. I was the person that paid our bills while we started the clinic. So in April, we said, all right, what can we do? We actually talked to the CrossFit gym owner and we said, hey, can we build a space out? And we took all the money we saved. I believe it was $7,500. We emptied our savings account and we built a space inside the CrossFit gym. We put up the walls, we did the drywall, we did the paint. We actually ended up hiring out to do the electrical, obviously, and the drywall, because drywall sucks. So don't do that yourself. So we built out this space and we spent our savings on it. We bought the models, we bought the TheraBand, we bought and I say that like TheraBand, like we use it all the time, but we definitely bought stuff for the clinic. We bought the Rogue bands, we bought the, oh my God, what is the name is escaping me. We bought every single piece of equipment, the slant boards, the AirX pads. We bought everything. We bought all the equipment for the clinic, right? So we had a savings account. We emptied it. We bought the things. We built the space. This was now, I believe we finished the space. I remember being at my parents' house on July 4th for July 4th, like celebrating July 4th. And we opened the clinic like a week later. I think it was July 9th, July 10th. That we actually opened the clinic for business. So once again, we started the PT clinic. We both did not practice ever, orthopedics, sports performance, whatever, in the area that we opened up this clinic in. We simply graduated PT school in New York. Yes, we did clinicals, but they were away from this. They were about an hour and a half away from where this clinic is. So open up the clinic in July. So from April to July, I was essentially making the money that we needed in order to pay our bills. Kyle was basically developing the clinic side. I actually started treating more than Kyle because in April, once again backing up, Kyle started working construction for his dad. So his dad is a contractor. He started driving up about an hour every day, an hour up and back. He was working for his dad as a laborer. So he ran the excavator, he shoveled, he did all the heavy equipment stuff. He worked. He did site work. He helped paint houses. Like he did all the stuff that I don't know if anyone even knows that part of Kyle's story, but when he was younger, he did that as well. So in April, his dad was like, well, I can offer you a job. So here we are, April. All right. We decided together that we're going to start this clinic. I had a full-time, part-time, another part-time, and then my business. Kyle was like, I have to make money somehow because he wanted to contribute. He also couldn't sit around. There's only so much time you can like sit around and do nothing before you drive yourself nuts. So he was like, I'm going to work for my dad. So he started working for his dad. I believe he was doing that 5 days a week. So this is where the story gets kind of wild. So he was working 5 days a week for his dad as we're developing the clinic, right? So he would treat at night if he wanted to treat. He would treat at night if he got a patient. Okay. His schedule was just then. And then I was working at the clinic because I started taking patients at the clinic first. So we started taking patients in July. I believe by August, I was seeing like 2 to 3 patients a week. And that's it. 2 to 3 patients a week for me. I think Kyle had maybe 1 to 2. And I started increasing my caseload at the clinic to probably, I think I ended up that December, because this is all building period. That December I had 5 to 10, I think. And Kyle had just started to get more like 4 to 5 a week. So we didn't have a lot of patients per week. So if you do the math on that, that's not a lot of patients. The cool part, the best part about our rental situation for where we built the space out was we built the space out with our money, right? So that's obviously, it was nice because we built it out and made it look really, really nice. The other thing is I traded a website for that CrossFit gym for rent for 6 months. So we actually went rent-free for 6 months. So the only overhead for our clinic was our documentation system, which was pretty awesome because it gave us a great jumping point, right? So we didn't have a ton of expenses. So, and our malpractice insurance, obviously. But so now let's go. So let's just be in the middle of December here, December of 2021. I was now working a fuck ton of hours. And I say that because it used to be a joke. Like people would joke with me and they're like, how many jobs do you have? You have 5 jobs, 6 jobs? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing whatever the fuck it takes to make this plan work. Because the other thing too is that we always had an escape plan. Like we always had an escape plan. We were not wrapped into a long-term lease. We were not wrapped into a house. Our plan was that if shit failed, we could leave. We could just go be travel PTs again, because once September, October hit, there were tons of travel PT jobs. So at any point in time, we could have just threw our white flag in the air and left. And that was honestly, that was so freeing. It was so freeing. And the biggest thing that I want to say is that when you start a PT clinic, when you start a business as such, in an area where you don't know anybody, you can't expect to grow to be this huge clinic in a couple months. Like, it was only 6 months that we had been open, less than 6 months, and we didn't have a huge caseload, and we didn't expect to. And also, a big value of ours was we're not selling our services. We are physical therapists. We can help you, but there was never a monetary push, because we were making money elsewhere to put bread on the table and to pay our rent that we were paying to Kyle's sister and to buy our groceries. We had other jobs. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that people miss when they're opening up a brick and mortar space. You have to have something else that puts bread on your table, or whether it's a partner who makes a full-time salary, or, we were both PTs and we both own this clinic. That's a big thing for us. It's like we both did this. So because we were both in it, we had to figure out a way to make this authentic. We are not motivated by making a sale. That is not what this is about. And if anything, at Renegade, we push people out the door. We're like, you can think about it. Please don't make an investment in a package until you're ready. Like, we're here when you need us. That's how we wanted to operate our business. We didn't want it to be like, oh my God, we have to have an eval this week or else we're not going to be able to pay our bills. Like, that's not what we wanted our business to be based off. So yes, we made sacrifices in every other piece of our life. We worked, I think I was working at this point in time in December, I was working probably between 90 to 120 hours a week. And I say that, and I'm saying that now after being past it, like, I was working 92. I'm not celebrating that. I'm telling you, I had to do what I had to do while I had to do it. And I was working, I would get up at 6 a.m. and I would not stop working until most nights about 11 p.m. And I was between all of the jobs that I had. Yes, my head was held on straight because I thrive in that like busy environment and like a lot of stuff to do environment. So that was not a problem. But we were making our ends meet by having other jobs. Kyle, once again, was commuting. He was working 10 to 12-hour days at his dad's business. This was December. So in December, he decided to drop Friday with his dad. So he then had all of his clinic hours on Fridays. I believe it was Friday or Monday. It was one day. I believe maybe it was Monday. So he dropped one day with his dad. So he now was booking his patients on a Monday only. And I still had patients every day. Basically, my schedule was open. So we were in and out of that space. So this is where we started to see more patients come in because there was more availability and there was more time to do marketing, etc. Because we had been holding workshops, people had been talking to their friends about us, we had been, going around to local businesses up until then, all of the basic stuff that you do when you open up a business, right? So we're attending all the things, we're doing all the things that we had learned and watched work for other people. And we're still posting on Instagram, which was a huge success for us. And in December, Kyle knocked back one day. So the goal was for Kyle to now take patients on that I would have been taking on prior because he now had more time to do so instead of treating from 6 to 8 p.m. at night. So Kyle started filling up that day. So at that point, I was taking less evals and Kyle was taking more of the evaluation. So he then had more patients. I believe in January, he had he was seeing like 5 to 7. I believe it was 5 to 7 a week. And I was still at I think my max a week was only ever 13. And once I started discharging those people, I stopped taking new people and Kyle started taking the new people. So I believe in January, he was at it was 7 or 8 a week. And I was dropping down. So now I was mostly at 7 or 8 a week. We were never chock full at our first location. And that was inside the CrossFit gym, which I'll talk about in a second. This is also a hella long episode. So if you have to split this up, God bless you for still listening. But this is all I'm just trying to give you the actual story so that you understand what goes into building this shit. So I still have not gone back to April 2020 in my digital business, and we'll get there in a second. I'm going to go through Renegade first. So it's now January of 2021. Kyle and I sat down and we basically said to each other, we said, we can't do this. Like, this is not working. We are not getting new patients. We're not seeing the results that we expected to see. We're having to work our ass off and excuse me. We're having to work our ass off and we're not seeing the light. Like, we don't see when Kyle can stop working construction or when I can stop having 18 jobs. Like, we just didn't see the light. And I remember having the conversation of, we're going to give it. So I had given it until the end of February. And Kyle was like, no, like, let's give it to the end of March. And if at the end of March, we didn't have more success and we weren't seeing, a way to eventually make this work, then what we were going to do was shut down the clinic. And he was either going to take a full-time job locally in a PT clinic. He actually did put in some applications. And we were on Indeed. We were doing all the things in January and February. And he put in some applications, did some interviews even. And we said if it didn't work by the end of March, he had to get a full-time job because he wanted to be a PT, right? So he didn't want to work construction for the rest of his life. So he wanted to be a PT. So he's like, okay, I'll get a full-time PT job. And then with the hopes of keeping Renegade part-time on the side. So you can call it faith, you can call it the universe, whatever you want to call it. In February and March of 2021, we quadrupled our income now for Renegade. And we don't know why. We did not change anything, but this is what we think happened. So in the summer of 2020, back up, we had been doing a ton of outreach, a ton of workshops, a ton. We met all these people. We gave out our cards. We did all that stuff. The people who we met then started calling us in February. So it took 6 months for them to call us and get on our schedule. We're still meeting people, still doing the stuff, still doing the baseline work here. We also moved spaces. So in January of 2020, we moved spaces it was technically in December. December was our first month there. So December of 2020, we moved spaces and we increased our rent by $250. So we doubled our rent because we weren't paying a lot at the CrossFit gym. But when we moved spaces, we increased our rent, still way lower than what you'd pay anywhere else. So we were in a standalone space with our own door. So for us, that was huge because we eventually wanted to do pelvic health and we didn't want that to be obviously in an open CrossFit gym. That didn't really look good. So we moved our space from the CrossFit gym to a standalone space that was connected to a gym, but we had our own front door. So the combination of finally being in a space that I don't want to say looked legitimate because I'm not trying to make it sound like people who are in a CrossFit gym are not legitimate. But for us, we felt like we had more legitimacy when we had our own address and our own front door. So we're thinking between that and also it's more approachable. If you don't do CrossFit and then you're coming to a CrossFit box for treatment, you are not in your element. Like people don't want to go to a CrossFit gym for treatment, I don't think. So we found that a lot more people were open to coming to our clinic when we were in this new space. So the new space in combination with the 6-month ROI return period on the workshops and stuff we were doing in summer of 2020. So in March of 2021, we finally were seeing like a little bit of light. So I'm going to skip all the nitty gritty details, but from March of 2021 to October of 2021, we still were busting our ass as far as like doing the most. We met a bunch of people. We were doing all the networking events. We were obviously giving the best treatment to our clients too. Like that's a huge part of this. Like you have to be good and you have to give people results and people will talk about you. And you got to do your job from a place of we really care about the results we're getting. We spent extra time with patients. We obviously would communicate with them on discovery calls, and a 15-minute discovery call sometimes turned into 45. Like it just was what it was, and we don't regret any piece of that. Like that was part of building our business. So in March, we started to see that light, like I said. And from there, we started to have what everyone, and especially Shantae, had said, 18 months, right? So if you measure your progress in 18 months, you'll never be disappointed. When we originally did our assessment in January of 2021, we said, oh shit, we're not making it. We're going to close our doors. It hadn't even been a year yet. So you can imagine at a year, we shouldn't have expected to be cranking like with patients and be busy and be able to quit full-time jobs and whatever else. So in March of 2020, it was really February of 2020. Or 2021, jeepers. We're in the new space. Kyle cut back 2 days. He met with Shantae and she said, you need to create the space and you'll fill it. So create space and you'll fill the space. So he took off 2 more days with his dad and started to fill patients in those slots. So now Kyle's seeing a lot more patients than I am. I'm really cutting back because my business was busy at that point too. So I'll get into that shortly because I'm going to try to keep this jeepers underneath an hour and 10 minutes. So from March of 2021 to now, Kyle cut back to 5 days. So let's talk about that first. So I believe it was early summer of 2021. Kyle actually cut back from his working for his dad entirely. He ditched it all. So he was doing well enough with Renegade where he could make ends meet and not need the full-time job on top of the clinic. Or really, it was like super part-time at that point because he was working like 10-hour days. So he was still working 35 hours a week. 3 days a week, and then he cut back one, so he's still working like 25 hours a week. It was a lot. So he cut back entirely. So he was working 5 days a week at Renegade. The space that he wasn't working with the patient, he was calling people, he was writing letters, he was reaching out to local business owners, he's in a business networking group, so he was having one-to-ones with those folks. So he was really working hard to spread the word, do the thing, because I am now still doing all of my stuff as well. So now, that was summer. So then from then on, and this is just like a very blanket statement, from then on, Renegade has it's been running itself as far as we don't need to go out and do workshops every single week. Could we do more? Absolutely. Absolutely we could. And I don't want to diminish that. We could definitely do more. But the thing is it took us 18 months to really see growth in a way where we have people calling our phone and not the other way around. So people submitting contact forms, people calling our phone, us being able to meet with local doctors. That didn't happen until 18 months after we started. It was genuinely 18 months. And for us, it was probably slower because we had other jobs and also we didn't work in the area before. So we, like I said, started this from literal scratch. We did know the CrossFit gym people because we had worked out with them at a different CrossFit location before we moved to Alaska. So we did have like a general, idea of who people were there, but we also were not like the steadfast community members that had been there the past 3 years because we were in Ketchikan. So we didn't start off with a ton of people we knew. And it just took time. And having the full-time jobs on top of everything, we sacrificed our life. We did not have a life. We did not really go out. We were always working. We were working on the weekends. We were both solidly putting in probably 80 hours a week. And that's what it took to build our business. And I feel like people might see it from the outside and say like, oh, you work a lot. But I think it's also a piece of like, how did you build that thing? It's truly, it was a lot of work and a lot of frustration, and it was a lot of hours. And we worked really hard to do that part. And now it's more or less for Renegade. It's more or less about we keep doing the good stuff for patients. Our goals have not changed. We don't cut sessions off at an hour. Like I know Kyle goes over all the time. We now have an independent contractor, Kaylee, who is at our clinic. She works out of our clinic, and she is the same way. She is basically the same as I am because I don't treat in person anymore. So I'm not treating at the clinic. It's a boutique clinic space anyway. You can only have one clinician in there at a time. So if Kyle's full time and Kaylee is seeing patients, it's completely impossible for me to also see people as well. And if you own a clinic, you know that you have all the admin shit to do. So I do all the admin stuff. And that's a lot. So that's really where I'm at with Renegade. So 18 months, all the work that you put in August, you might not see people until February or March from those workshops that you do. Instagram was huge for us, getting legitimacy on Instagram, posting stuff that we're doing. Instagram stories, people love Instagram stories, and it's great to be able to engage with your people in real life. It's a real life feeling, and also not straying from our values the entire time. Our values were great care, making sure that we spent the time with our patients, we address the root cause, we get them results. That was a huge part of our success because we did not stray from that, and we gave ourselves the opportunity to stay steadfast in that because we had full-time jobs. We had other jobs that were paying our bills and putting food on the table. And that was huge. There was no pressure in our sales. We didn't have to make the sale. We never wanted to have to make the sale. We still don't want to have to make a sale. That's just not what that's not how we want to run our fucking business. And I think that it's a line that you have to very much so feel comfortable not crossing. And that's how Renegade really started to thrive. And there's pieces that I'm obviously leaving out, like not being able to afford clinic supplies some months because we weren't making enough money, and not being able to really afford getting the Gucci business cards and getting the business cards that were a little cheaper so that we could put that money elsewhere. We made sacrifices throughout the building of our business. And at this point right now, I can say that, we're able to have a stock of supplies in our clinic. And that wasn't the case before. It just wasn't. We couldn't buy extra Rogue bands to sell to patients because we didn't have the money up front. So my message for people who are building a brick and mortar clinic is to make your expectations match, I want to say, an 18-month plus span. If you go in expecting to be cranking at 6 months and you're not, it's super fucking defeating. And it was for us because we watched other people in the groups we're in. We were like, why did they have booked out schedules at 6 months? We were watching this. We watched this happen in real time. And we were like, we must not be doing something right. And in actuality, we had other jobs, so we didn't have as much time to give to Renegade, but also we didn't work in that area, so no one knew who we were. So we were legitimately starting from scratch. So your story may not look like the other stories that you see, and our goal was not like an XK month. Like, we didn't have a goal of money per month. Our goal was to pay our bills. Like, that was our goal. And our goal was not to replace our PT salary that we had with travel PT. That was not our goal. Our goal was to pay our bills and have a little bit of extra money to live our life and go out to dinner, because Kyle loves going out to dinner. So we wanted to make sure we put that as something that we could do. And lowering your expectations to just understand that it could take 18 months plus. And that just is what it is. So that's really like the curtain being pulled back on our brick and mortar and how we made it happen. Because I think people look at it and they do ask, how do you run a brick and mortar practice and your digital business? And I'm like, you have no idea. It was a lot more than that. And I'm not saying that to gloat. I'm saying that because I had to do what I had to do. I had to do what I had to do in order to make this shit work. So, and I'm super thankful. I'm super thankful for the drive that I was given. My undergrad program gave me this like drive that I engaged during this whole process, because being a bio major was really, really hard. I said that in a different episode as well. So my digital business was a little bit different, and this story is much quicker, but in March of 2020, I was doing a lot of discovery calls with clients, and everyone kept saying the same thing. They kept saying, Lex, I want a website, but I feel like I could like manage the tech component as long as I have the skeleton of a website because I'm just really bad at design. And I said, okay, cool. Sounds great. So everyone kept saying the same thing. So what I did was I said, all right, I invested in a mastermind in January of 2020. Kyle said, Alexis, spend the money. You like doing this stuff, invest in the mastermind. So in that mastermind, we had talked about template building and website building and website design, and I really dove deep into all that stuff. So in March of 2020, I remember I was at my sister-in-law's house. I worked nonstop. This was before I got the part-time job and the full-time job, the pediatric job. So I had only one thing to pay attention to, and it was my business. This was before all the other stuff. I sat down and I developed my Squarespace templates. And I built them out from scratch. I created the tutorial videos for them. I set up all the automations to send the emails. I did all the things. And I created the template shop. And that was the first thing that I launched. And mind you, I opened my business in June of 2018. So that was now March of 2020. So 2 years later, I had my first, I'm going to launch this thing. The launch did really well. I think I sold, I think it was 8 templates, which is pretty cool. So I sold 8 templates. And then from there, I started creating some Instagram content, but not a lot. My Instagram was mostly it was a random mix between pediatric PT, living my life, my digital business, and then just random stuff. So, I still wasn't posting on Instagram consistently. My business though was still growing. So I just had more clients. I had a couple more clients, and it ended up being really good because I was able to really solidify my skills with website design. And, I worked really hard. I did a couple continuing ed stuff as well, to really just learn the nitty gritty. Right. So, because I had the time to do so. So I started those full-time jobs. I still was working my full-time jobs this entire time. It's now July of 2021. I joined Emma Jack's mastermind. She reached out to me. And at this point, if you are familiar with my Instagram, you know that Emma and I work together now. So we actually share clients, and it's amazing. I love what we do together. And at that point, Emma reached out to me and was like, hey, I feel like you'd be a perfect fit for this specific group of people who are doing a mastermind with me. Do you want to do it? And I said, sure. So I joined Emma's mastermind. It was the most money that I have spent on myself ever. And I say that very proudly because I was like, I'm going to invest in myself, my inner self, rather than a business skill. And that's a pivot for me. That's a huge mind shift, because before I wouldn't have seen the value in that. So I invested in Emma's mastermind, and in that mastermind, between the people there and Emma, I got the confidence to plan out when I was going to quit my full-time job. Now, here's the thing, and there's the housing episode. So we're July of 2021. Renegade at that point was doing really well. Kyle was working there full time. I was still seeing 2 to 3 patients a week. So at that time, I'm just going to recap. Kyle's full time at Renegade 5 days a week. I am still working my full-time pediatric job, my part-time pediatric job, working at Utica University, doing my business, and working at Renegade. Deep breath. I know. How did I survive? I think about that and I'm like, Jesus, I must have been drinking 18 million cups of coffee. So that was what I was doing at that point in time. I want you to think about the fact that, and I'm going to do a whole episode on entrepreneurship as well and what you need to expect, but I had to have a full-time job in order to qualify for a place to rent and to buy a house. So I could not physically quit my full-time pediatric job. I actually stepped away from one of my part-time ones at that exact time. During Emma's mastermind, I was like, I can't do this one anymore. I'm not really working a ton of hours there anyway. I'm going to step away. So I left that one part-time pediatric job. I had to keep my full-time pediatric job until we bought a house, until we qualified for something, or until my business or Renegade counted for income, because they still didn't count. So it's only me who was able to count for income. So even if we wanted to rent a place, I had to show that I was making money to pay the rent. Well, that only happens with a W-2 job. So I had to keep my W-2 job until we decided what the hell we were going to do. Because once again, we had planned if Renegade fails, we're just going to leave. So we hadn't signed on to like a long-term lease. So now we're in August of 2021. We got a lease, we got an apartment, and then in October of 2021, I then quit my full-time pediatric job. So at that point in time, I was working at Renegade, I had my business, I was working at Utica University. So I still had those 3 jobs. My business was now doing well enough where I was getting clients from Instagram, from my website, and I was being referred to a lot from folks who trusted me. And I was like, all right, I think I'm going to take the jump. Like I had talked to Emma and the group about like what I was doing back in July and August. And they were like, yes, you need to do it. Like you need to be full-time as soon as you can. And as soon as we got that lease in August, it was scary as hell, but I left that full-time job. And the thing is, and I want to make sure I say this to people, the job that I had, the full-time job that I had, I could have stayed there until I died. I could have stayed there for the rest of my life until I retired. It was the best full-time pediatric job I ever could have had. I got paid for documentation time. I got to play all day. The people that were my bosses and my coworkers were the most incredible people. They threw me a bridal shower. They were honestly the best humans. Honest to God, if something never works out or something doesn't work out, I would love to go back there to work. It was the best job. And I had a hard time leaving because I was like, I loved having this job. I loved doing it. But at that point in time, I was spending a lot of time, extra time working on my digital business when I should have been doing more stuff for seeking out patients for pediatrics and like really touching base more. And like, I just felt like I was splitting my attention too much. And I was like, something has to give. So I ended up quitting my job in October of 2021. In November of 2021, I went full time with my digital business. And then I still had my side Utica University job because I was an adjunct professor. So now from November of 2021 until now, I've been full-time in my job and I've been slowly cutting back patient care, and now I'm not treating in person. So I'm not treating at the Renegade Clinic. It's also an hour from our house, so it wouldn't really make sense for me and Kyle to travel down there when we can't treat at the same time anyway. And yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been a lot of ups and downs getting to where we're at, because working all the hours that we worked it's not easy. And I feel like people look at where we're at right now and they wonder how that happened. And honest to God, like I said before, we just did exactly what we had to do while we had to do it until we could do what we're doing right now. And the thing is like our whole goal was being fulfilled. Our whole goal was to be fulfilled and to love what we're doing. And at this point in time, like I can honestly say I love what I do for my job. I love that I get to do what I do every single day. And Kyle loves what he does every single day. Do we still have hard days? Yes. Do we still have days where we're like, oh God, like, can we afford this? Yes, obviously. But the reason why I was finally able to quit that full-time job and not work, 90 hours a week on top of my business and Renegade and that full-time job was because we got an apartment and we didn't need to qualify for anything. And then conveniently so, Renegade had started to count for income in 2022 July because it had been 2 tax returns. So 2 tax returns in 2 years. Those are different. Tax returns and years of business are different. So don't forget about that. So Kyle's income technically didn't count until July of 2022. So that's why we started and were able to qualify for a house in last summer of 2022, because both of our income finally count from my business and from Renegade. So everything worked out in a great way, but I will say the middle pieces, we sacrificed a lot, and we didn't hang out with friends a lot. We didn't go out with family. If there were big events, we sometimes missed them. If we had an event for our clinic, we wouldn't be going to a friend event that happened at the same time. I will be honest, I used to go home to my parents' house and I would be out of my current operating environment and I would crash. I would completely crash. And it's just because like it was my first chance to be out of my routine, and I would sleep. And it was when I got my sleep. So I want to just say the summary from this episode and why it's lasted an hour. Jesus, I'm so sorry. And what I hope you take from this is the following. If you're building a brick and mortar physical therapy business, you have to don't burn the ships. You have to have an income supporting you as you build. Otherwise, it's going to create a lot of anxiety. And I am proud to say that we never had that anxiety. And I would not do it differently. If I could do it differently, I wouldn't. I would not want the anxiety of needing to make a sale and getting more patients, and you need 5 patients, not 2. And that's just too much. It's too much anxiety, too much stress. So I would say make sure you create that environment accordingly and have support as you are building your clinic, whether you started a side hustle and then transition to full-time or whatever. My next thing is, if you haven't worked in the area prior, you still can make it happen. You can still start a clinic in an area where you have not worked before, and it can be amazingly successful, and you can meet all the people and be a part of groups that you never thought you'd be a part of. You just have to, it's going to take longer to do so. It just is what it is. And you have to understand that getting relationships with doctors and stuff, that takes forever, and it's a-okay. It makes sense why it takes a long time, and building trust takes a long time. So 18 months, and I will stick with what Shantae said on that. Like, you need to measure your progress in an 18-month span so that you're not disappointed. My other thing is that if you do the work now, seeing the ROI on that might take 6 to 8 months. And it might take 6 to 8 months. That just is what it is, especially for brick and mortar businesses. And for my online business, I recognize that I skipped a big part, but I'll say that in a second. In my little summary pieces, I did this as a side hustle for 3 years, before 18, 19, 20, 21, 4 years. I did this as a side hustle for 4 years. No, that'd be one. No, that'd be 3. Yeah, 3 years. It was 3 years, really. 3.5. Let's give it 3.5. For 3.5 years before I went full time with it. So if you do the math on that, that's a long time. It was my side hustle, quote unquote, for a really long time before I went full time. And I did not start to, because I left this part out, in September of 2021, right before I quit my full-time job, I started posting every single day on Instagram. And I created a body of work on Instagram that allowed me to have more legitimacy. People trusted me more. I became a trusted resource, and I went all in. I was on Shantae's podcast, and after that I said, I need to do this thing. Like, I need to commit to doing this. I need to not be afraid to post who I am, what I do on Instagram like I had been before, because like social pressures, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to put myself out there like that. And I said, no, I need to make this happen. This is my life. I love what I do. I need to share what I do. And once I started sharing on Instagram, more people were just like, oh, cool. Like, this is what Lex does. And I would love to talk to Lex, and I'm going to learn stuff from Lex. And I started to, obviously gain traction with what I did and who I did it for and how I help people. And it was the best. And I will say that for my online business, I started with one-on-one services. And I did not have a group program until SEO school in May of 2022. So once again, almost 4 years into the business before I created any sort of thing that was a group program. But products and my, low ticket webinars, as well as my templates, were really what I built my business on. And then I started doing retainer clients in 2021 as well. So monthly retainer clients was huge for my business, just because it was a recurring income it allowed me freedom to do with what I needed for my time, but then also it gave me the security of having a monthly income as well. So once again, 18 months for sure, but for me, I didn't go full time in my digital business until I could afford to do so, because we got an apartment. Like, that was my biggest thing, is I cannot go full time in this until we have an apartment and I have an income that can support our student loans once again, and our rent and our food and a little bit of frivolous money. So just understanding that your timeline is going to look much different than other people's timelines. And The whole point of this episode is, one, to sit with people and say, like, this shit is fucking hard. And I am never going to tell you that this is easy. I want you to feel like if you're seeing other people succeed quickly and have more success than you, just give it time. Sit back, give it time, do the work, and trust that whatever happens, you can handle that. And the thing is you can't compare your beginning to someone else's end or middle. Like, it just doesn't work. And it's going to put you in a mindset where you feel like you're going to compare yourself and then get down on yourself because you're not where they're at. And it just doesn't work that way. You can't let that happen. And I'm sitting with you and saying, like, you have to do what you have to do until it's done. And until you can do what you want to do, it is one of those things where you just have to bite the bullet and do what you have to do to make ends meet. And I'm sitting with you in that. So I know there's a lot of stories out there where people are like, I went from 0 to 10K in 2 months. Like, that is the worst fucking story in the world. And I will stand on that hill forever. That is the dumbest thing that people share, because for one, if you don't know enough to step back and say, like, okay, cool, this person made 10K in a month. One, what does 10K mean? I digress. And also, it's like, did they work in that area prior? Did they have clients that existed prior? Like, what is the actual deal here? So I think that's stupid to share that type of success, because that then creates this big comparison between you and someone else. And I know that because we were doing it. Kyle and I were comparing ourselves to people who were posting stuff like this. And I was like, but this is not real. It happened for them, but for us being in a different scenario, it's not real for us. Like, that's not how it's going to work. And also, just keep doing the thing and keep your eyes on your own paper. I think Shantae said that as well. You can't be looking at other people's success and comparing yourself the entire time. Yeah, sure, you're going to compare. It's human nature. But as far as business success goes and understanding, like, where you're at in your business and where they're at in their business, I would not sit there and compare yourself, because if you just do the work and you start doing things day by day and keep taking steps forward and moving the needle forward, you're going to get there. It's just going to take a different amount of time, and that's A-okay. So, long episode, just kind of talking about, one, relating to the people who are in this place of they're grinding and they're not sure when they're going to see the light. Keep doing it, and just make sure that you're measuring your success in that 18 months. Because for both businesses that I've been a part of, we are seeing that 18 months is really a great timeline. And also just understand that you have to do what you have to do. And outside opinions are really, really hard to not listen to and to not take to heart. So understanding and being comfortable with the fact that, like, you have to do things sometimes until what you want to do works, and standing firm in your decision to do what you need to do is super, super hard. And I am with you on that. But in order to reach your dream, just understand that that's just sometimes what you got to do. Got to do what you got to do. That's like the moral here. Beating around the bush on that one. So yeah, that's kind of an inside look of the startup of both of those businesses. If you've ever wondered, just because I always have people asking me how many jobs I have, because like I said, it was a running joke, and just kind of wondering how things started. So it wasn't our plan, but I'm so grateful that it worked out. And yeah, I'm just super, super grateful it worked out, even if it was not the timeline that we intended on. And it made some things a lot more complicated than it needed to be. But yeah, I will share in future episodes. I will share like lessons we learned throughout the process, because I'm already at 1 hour and 20 minutes. My God. I'll share about the lessons that we have learned throughout this process, because there are different lessons for each business. And yeah, so look for that in future episodes. But until then, thank you for listening. And if you listen to this whole episode, God bless you, because this is really, really long. So I truly, truly do appreciate it. And yeah, thank you. Let me know what you think. As always, I'm open to suggestions and open to hearing your opinions on these episodes. And I hope if you have felt alone in your business development, I'm hoping that this helped you feel at least a little less alone as you are doing the thing. So I will catch you next time. Thank you so much for being here.